do like
what's happening right now. We can talk.
Mayor.
Justin, can you hear me?
we're good.
Okay, got it.
Hey, welcome to our work meeting for Valentine's. Happy Valentine's. Thank you all for spending it with us. Appreciate our Lauren and our planning department providing us some decorations.
Our planning,
Yeah, Lauren down in planning.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
She'll have some treats.
She's on our culture committee. She definitely brings some young energy to our group, so.
It's good. We need that.
Yeah.
Okay, review of this evening's agenda. I did just have a suggestion from Councilmember Warren and I like it. Most of our guests tonight are for 2.1 and 2.3 and 4. So we thought about moving 2.2 down to after 2. So basically move it to 2.4 after the other two.
Yeah.
And do discussions. Any objections to that?
Is anybody here for 2.2?
I am.
It's always Todd.
Always talk. Okay, so with that, we'll make that change then. Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none. 1.2 future agenda items.
I had something. I just gonna put it in my notepad.
Mayor, did we get an email from that group?
Yeah, Nathan,
Okay.
so Nathan sent an email.
Well, I sent an email, I haven't received
You didn't see
it,
it?
I just sent you some backup for it. I don't know if Blake got some.
I think we might have already talked about this, but talking about the CDRA housing funds, like what's the options or where we can spend that or what.
CDGB
Yeah.
stuff.
Maybe, I don't know, I put CDRA on there though.
CDRA, we do have housing funds for CDRA
Yeah,
as well.
like
so that's
260 or something like
probably,
that.
conversation we can have in the future.
Just kind of where we can spend it at, or what the requirements are.
Now, I don't know if this is an agenda item, but there were some discussions yesterday that made me think about, do we have our capital projects plan posted online? Our CIP, whatever we call it, you know?
Yes, just current and upcoming ones.
Kyle's been working with the group to refine it quite a bit, so maybe after all those refinements are complete.
Maybe after we refine it and if, you know, maybe we even simplify it or something like that, but people are asking, so when is this gonna be done and
Yeah.
when is that gonna be done and why wasn't this, and I think it's important to understand that, you know, when we're talking about impact fee kind of projects, sometimes they take 10 years of collections before we have the 20% of what it actually costs to build, but you know, there's a long time frame on some of these. Also understanding that, you know, some are city developed, some are more project oriented.
Yeah, some
And
of
so-
them are not impact fee eligible.
Right, and so I think it's just for a transparency and disclosure thing, helping residents understand, here's all the things that still need to be done, we have a plan for them, here's when they're scheduled to be, this is how much they cost. I think that's really important for people to be able to go to the website and see that.
Well, having it available on there, kind of like a few things that Stephen had requested the last 6 months or so. When we get questions, right, calls, emails from constituents, then we can point them to that instead of saying, hey, where can you get me some of this that I can put something together? It takes everybody's time. It's something that we should have and we should be able to just point to.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's just asking about when are we gonna repave X road, and I'm like, I don't know, probably sometime in the next
Yeah.
4 or 5 years, you know?
So
It's on-
sometimes
it's
it
on the
may not
list, but
have
what's
that
the
level
list?
of detail,
Right, and that may not be-
if it's
right.
in a maintenance,
Yeah.
but so a detailed capital, multi-year detailed capital plan, we've only had that for about 2 years. After
And I
here,
explained that to somebody too,
So,
like, this is still in its infancy.
The refining that Kyle's doing is, we ended up putting a lot of things into years without any thought for how do you pay for it, that actually next Wednesday, if they can come, and you're gonna have to have a long conversation about that. We finally got our arms around the a lot of the MDA and the reimbursement agreement, so once that's done, yeah, putting out, I actually find what you're just talking about, I've done it in other places, it answers a lot of those questions for people. The challenge is you put it out there and then
It changes.
something else comes up and that project, maybe you wanna go, but the the gas company has a big project, so you can't do that road, cause they're
Well,
behind you, so you just try to explain that.
And
but
again,
that
I think
changes.
some kind of a disclosure and explanation about, here's the plan, the best we have, but circumstances change and funding gets held up and,
Here's the list
you know,
as it
things
is
happen
today.
and the state changes the
Yeah.
rules and, you know.
So for the first part, maybe after our special meeting next Wednesday, I can get some more direction.
Okay.
I think I get understand what you're looking for, but I can explain what changes we've made with the CIP process.
Fair enough, thank you.
Blake did get this email then, so Slackwater reached out to a few of us. Cause we know they're getting ready to open 2 weeks, I think they were talking about, 2 to 3 weeks. Is
We're gonna do their
Soft
friends
opening.
and family March 8th,
Yeah, something like that.
and then ribbon cutting a couple of weeks.
Okay, so there was some discussion, sounded like a misunderstanding, where they were looking for a incentive from the city. Our incentive was then set up through the developer. There was a misunderstanding, they thought it might possibly come from both. So they do have it from the developer, there's a 10-year thing, there's a development in place with the developer. So we committed today to at least ask if there is any interest in discussing an additional incentive with Slackwater to add it to a future agenda. We committed to bring that up and see if there would be 2 votes for that.
To add it to an agenda?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd be comfortable adding it to agenda. If they want us to talk about it, I think it's fine to talk about it.
They have a-
Same too, yeah, they shouldn't take that as an
As a yes.
indication.
It's
Right.
just
They,
that
they
Always
understand
willing
that
to talk.
part. The reason they're asking for a little incentive is their fees were a little bit higher than anticipated, which I think the developer's taken care of that portion. But when they went out and purchased the property and got the loan, it was right when interest rates went crazy. So rates went sky high on them, and they pushed, and they understand that was the risk they took. They're just looking to see if there's anything that could happen. So we'll come up with some ideas if you're okay with it on the agenda.
I think really the first would be for you to discuss if you want, how much staff time you want us to put in, come up with ideas first. Just honestly, you open the door, you open the door. So my professional opinion is be careful opening that door, because if you do it for one, you should be doing it for all of them.
Right, I don't know if this is probably site specific to Slackwater, but any business that comes in like in our area that, where are we comfortable or are we comfortable of shifting or changing those fees? And I don't know what that looks like, but what fees could we do? There are possibility, like, I don't know all the fees that get charged to these entities when they come in, right? And so maybe it's a high, from my view, it'd be like a high level, like, here's A, B, C, D, these fees are always with every property, here's the special fees with every other properties, and just see where that looks like.
Well, we were clear with them that we haven't given that to any other, we haven't given it to Garage or.
And I don't know if this would be Slackwater, but maybe it's a discussion of the opportunities.
I think
or
that would
fee
be
schedule.
important to understand as part of, it's a good time to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But I don't wanna,
I know where you're going.
our point of putting it on an agenda is not to discuss necessarily approving it. I don't want them to suggest that it. But I do think that a discussion about how we approach fees as a city and when and where and how we may be willing to do that is something that needs to be a public, transparent discussion.
I mean, and even that's kind of continuing education, if you will.
Yeah.
For us.
For us, this
Right.
is how it works. Where I'm hesitant to say, put it on an agenda, and why I said they shouldn't take that as an indication is there's little chance that that will happen, like they just need to know that, and the discussion would be a higher level one. They shouldn't be holding out hope, in my opinion.
And I don't think I'd put agenda as Slackwater, it'd be a discussion or about.
Well, then that's, I guess that's where the good point then, cause how much staff time, cause this other is gonna be a high level, I mean, it's gonna be some staff time to get that all together, where I think they need an answer.
That's where I'm going with this. If they're looking for an answer from us,
So I think there's
and
two
I'd
different,
be careful,
Yeah,
this
that's
isn't an
true,
agenda
right.
item tonight, right, but
so that's what I'm saying, do we want specific, we need to talk specific Slackwater, they're close, they need to answer pretty quick.
And that's the thing, if they're asking for an agenda item, we put it on the agenda, but if they're wanting some sort of indication quickly, like that agenda item's not gonna do it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being on an agenda just simply because when somebody asks to be on an agenda and they have,
Discuss.
then I'm always okay to discuss it, but that should never indicate to them that, yeah, for sure, we're happy to approve that, it's just,
Internally, if you wanna take
Okay.
a straw poll, I'll be happy to tell you my opinion, right?
right, exactly.
So Nate, I think it's, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I think very little staff time on this, just tap on the agenda. Just this
Bring
is,
the ask.
bring the ask.
It makes it faster.
I've already got most of the base work done on it from when they requested several weeks ago, so.
And then down the road, I think we can have this.
Yeah, we've talked about,
And some other stuff.
it would be nice to have a policy that would, a council adopt a policy that guides us a little bit when people come and ask, we can say, this is when we would, this is when we consider it. Throughout my career, most of those incentives have been tied to jobs, job creation, certain type, not every job, certain jobs, so.
Or maybe a very
Details a little different,
specific
yeah.
type of business that we wanted to have in our city or
Well,
needed
if
or
there's
something.
no other there's already an incentive here, we've already done it.
Yeah, there's to the tune of 75%
Well,
of
I
the,
always think it has to be mutually
Actually.
beneficial, show me how, if we did that, how does that benefit our residents? Because they're gonna be the ones paying for that
Yep.
incentive, so how does it benefit our residents?
And I think to your point, Teddy, that's maybe more where the conversation needs to be, is this is how it works and this is what we've done in these areas already, so as people approach you individually,
They know where they stand.
you
already
you
a
know
city
what
already
is
there.
already there.
Yeah.
And we know it's already there.
That's what I say,
Staff might know,
more
but,
education for us and a reminder of where we're at on some of these
Cause
projects.
I would love to give everybody money and free fees and everything, but.
We don't have any,
Yeah. So I think 2 weeks then, if we just put it on the agenda. And then longer term, we can have these other conversations.
if only roads could be built for the cost of a Big Mac.
The Romans only built them one time, we have to build them every year.
Okay. 1.3, any council discussion of future citizen recognitions? So 28, we have,
The Rose Press card people and Derek.
and Dare. Okay, any other?
And from the jump start out.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to 2.1. No, I'm sorry, we're gonna push tonight. My wife's out of town. My son's a babysitter, so I'm gonna push tonight. We're gonna push. So 2.1, discussion regarding request of web transportation. Like,
Speaking of, fee reductions or waivers,
good intro right into that.
a little
That was
different.
first, go ahead.
This one's a little bit different, I can explain the unique nature of this project. So, this is the Mountainview Plaza, which is located, on the corner of Miller Crossing Drive and Main Street, up along close to Midas Creek, near the Auto Mall area. And so, you can see on the map, we call this project MVP for short. And they're surrounded by the Auto Mall and roads on 3 of the sides. So, the one road, Main Street, it's built, constructed, in service, paid for, open, being maintained, all those things. The other 2 roads are future roads, and this is where this one deviates from a typical project. These roads are inside of a PID, but MVP is not part of the PID. So typically, a project like this, if it were city roads, we would go to the developer and have them build half the road, and then we'd reimburse them with their impact fees, whatever portion was eligible for impact fee reimbursement. Since they're in a PID, they're exempt from impact fees, and they're under the district's control. So, the request was to waive their impact fees, and you can see on the site plan, they have, these 2 buildings are approved to go right now. These next 2 are the next ones to come up out of the ground. And then the phase line, these will come in the future, but the request is to waive all future traffic impact fees so that they can use those funds to negotiate with the PID board to build the road, because they're gonna have to pay for their half of the road to the PID board, similar how they normally do it for the city. So that's the request. It gives them some more flexibility, because originally the discussions were they'd pay their impact fees to us, and then we'd have to negotiate to build the road, and it kind of makes us be the middleman between this. Lets them be more in control of their project and control the funds better. So that's the request. This would have to come back to the council for a formal decision in a future meeting. We're just asking if there's support of that, put it on, or if it's unanimous, we can put it on a consent agenda. in a
But
future meeting.
just verifying, these are not roads that we need to build or that we're responsible for paying for.
That's right.
Staying out of the middle.
So before they were hit, they've been in the impact fees.
Yeah, we took them out when we did our impact fee study, but before the previous impact fee study, they were included in it.
So just a couple technical things look towards him, right? So on the heels of our impromptu, informal discussion, I think the word waive is the wrong word.
Correct.
Yeah, I
Not waiving
agree.
anything.
Transfer.
We don't, and we had this conversation as a policy, we don't waive any fees.
This is a fee in lieu of
Right, so
something.
in this case,
It's $6 million.
in this case, they're going to pay for their portion of the road is just a hood. Right, so my question is technically, we shouldn't be waiving anything for one, that's, the definition of that term is different than what we're talking about, right? Two, should our decision be contingent upon them reaching an agreement with the PID? If we just say you don't have to pay it, and then it's up to them, or do we say you don't have to pay us, you need to pay that amount to them, or you need to have an agreement with them? Does that make sense?
I think you could even go simpler than that, it just has, that road has to be constructed. We don't need to know who paid for what or did what, whatever their agreement between the two business entities should be their agreement. You know,
Their approval doesn't allow them to build any of phase two until those roads are
Right.
approved, so it
So
kind of
the-
locks them into that.
Yeah, the road will go in, and I agree, I think the word waive is probably the incorrect term, we could credit or, we could have a different term that applies to this situation. And we could have that in the formal, whatever the council decides in the formal sense.
So I'm saying the same thing, Teddy, it needs to be
Yep.
between them.
Yep.
But we need to make sure
There
it
needs
doesn't
to be a
come
piece of
back up,
paper,
we need to make
yeah.
sure it doesn't come back on us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we could think of some language as far as conditions that, milestones or something like that.
now,
To ensure that it happens.
I'd be under the assumption that they wouldn't be able to get into this without an entrance and exit on either one of those. So maybe that phase line's out of improper on that exit on that Midas Creek Road, right? On the north road, of the
Miller Crossing
Miller
Drive,
Crossing Road, sorry.
they can do the first couple of buildings with just that one.
Dennis,
But yeah, as soon as they go to the last three
Now,
buildings, they have to.
the city is,
So they wouldn't need, well, cause that's Mountain View corridor, right? Or Main Street.
Miller Crossing and Auto Hope Road Drive.
Okay.
Main Street.
Utilities though.
Yeah, but they're coming in Main Street,
They
right?
need
Coming in Main
utilities.
Street up the.
The first phase. So they wouldn't need roads, so they
So
can
Aaron said
actually
they
go
need
in.
utilities. They would
Oh.
need utilities.
We need
Not the right
utilities for
word.
buildings 3 and 4, and that's why that road has to go in. And well, that's the pressure we're feeling as well with 73 Partners is they're not super motivated to do anything. So we're trying to figure out how to get that, we need some help, right? to
Yeah.
Get things happen.
so if we can help facilitate that, right?
Is there any concerns with doing that, what you're suggesting? Anybody, staff, Aaron, anybody have any concerns about having just that stipulation in?
No, I actually want that, I want the agreement with us and 73 Partners in play. That way they know they're gonna get reimbursed from us and that there's a commitment to the city on both sides.
And then,
Okay.
and then they have to move it, right?
I can give a little background. We met on this road, those two roads, when was that, last week? And it sounded like they were getting ready to submit plans within the next couple of weeks on those
To do
roads.
Miller Crossing or,
Yeah, to submit them for us to start reviewing.
Gotta say, it's what you guys do.
It should be maybe
Dirt moving,
a
yeah.
few weeks on phase one, which is to the south, just north of the garage.
It's like having sweepers, they look like they're doing.
So, are we looking at doing an agreement for this then, is that?
Yes.
Or-
Yeah, we would do a formal agreement.
Does that need to come back to us, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll adopt it. We'll use a different word.
Agreed.
Okay.
I know it's semantic sometimes on words, but
No, it's important.
it's important,
I don't-
yeah.
Sends our own message.
Yeah.
Okay,
Todd has us the source.
Yeah, for Christmas.
okay, so you got what you need, Blake?
I do, thank you.
Okay.
I just had one question for the city, for the staff, just for clarity. When we're applying for building permits, how do we handle the building permit traffic impact fee component? Are we still paying it? Is that the issue?
So based on this, it sounds like you wouldn't pay,
It would be
there'd just be an
deferred?
agreement, and if the road, something, whatever Todd comes up with, smart language,
Turn to Todd, come up with the
it
right
would,
language.
you'd be required to pay if the road wasn't built and you were needing to go.
That makes sense to me. But when we apply, we've been using the word deferral, with staff, And if it's not a deferral or waiver, what do we say to him? Is it just something the staff directs the other staff to understand that that's not gonna be on our fee obligation for the permit?
That's why those guys get paid a lot.
That is,
Once
there's
once we have the agreement, it'll be, I think, there, so.
Well, they're uneducated.
It's almost like a transfer.
No,
We've had testimony about that in meetings.
this is the person that sits up on the dais with us.
I'll just follow your direction.
Maybe we'll call it a transfer or something, it's transferring from the city to the PID.
We'll come up with somewhere.
The last thing I wanna say, just for Todd's perspective, is Todd, we're working on the amount. I just don't want them to assume that they have the ability to charge the traffic impact fee to us.
Sure.
That's not what it should cost, right? We need to work through that with them, and it could even be more or less. Wanted that flexibility in there to have that negotiation with them.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
appreciate it, Aaron.
Appreciate your
Love
help.
seeing that going up.
Hey,
Yeah.
pads are in on buildings 1 and 2.
So good.
So nice.
Yep.
So excited.
Appreciate everything.
Have a wonderful evening. Happy
Thanks,
Valentine's.
guys.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
thanks.
Take your wife out.
You just did.
Yeah, just.
City council meeting.
Very romantic here.
Okay, well, we did have the Johnsons join us, so Paul, did you tell?
I did,
Sorry.
sorry,
good.
figure out numbers.
You don't have to. Okay.
Just come back
Just
around
Valentine's
9.
Just hold hands.
No.
Councilman Henderson's holding us over.
Okay, so let me,
If you
For
hold this
once I
over,
looked at the
it'll be
calendar and I
the
was
first
like,
time ever.
Yes, council
That
tonight.
basket home, and then you're good.
okay, let me, so 2, 3, and 2, we're gonna do 2, 3, and 2, 4. Let me just say, I've kind of briefed my staff, this is just, we're not really discussing this tonight, this is more outlining the steps, right? Just the next.
We're gonna give you an update where we're at, and certainly you can ask questions, but we're just giving you this update, here's where we're at, here's the next step. So that we're trying to keep you in the loop as this moves through this process.
We don't need a hash, I'm just saying,
That's good, cause
We'll
I
have that.
thought that, the way it appeared in the packet was just an update.
This is generally for information. If you do have something that jumps out and you want us to include it, because this is our last stop before we go to the public hearing with planning commission and in the real process of doing it. So we've had our work meeting with the planning commission, got some feedback, I'm gonna hit that up on a slide in a minute. And then these are just the details of what's been submitted, and this is essentially off to the races after this through the process. Maybe not the slow races, cause we wanna be methodical.
So I'm trying super hard to bite my tongue.
It's a turtle race.
Well, yeah, and what's this is the final stop before,
Before it gets into the real process.
right, so that's what I'm, reading the packet and my discussion with Nathan yesterday, I'm like, so this is just an update on planning commission stuff? Cause we've not talked about what I consider the meat, which is, I keep beating this dead horse that it's, the MDAs is what matters here, and those legislative decisions with us, yes, go through planning commission, get their feedback on the technical stuff that we talked about with Michael. But then we still haven't talked about all this laundry list of things and so don't wanna set the stage of off to the races to go. It's kinda cleared the minor hurdles with the planning commission with some of those details regarding does it fit our ordinances and setbacks and those sorts of things. The real meat and work is the MDAs.
And the MDA had been submitted for review, the comments just closed yesterday, and staff's been met with the developer today to go over those things.
And this is
So-
just for planning commission.
This is just.
I would
for
say
the
this
plan-
is a staff level review.
We're making sure
of
we're
those.
addressing the comments that have been said to this point in that MDA, so that when we bring it back to you, it's not way undone.
So I guess what I'm saying is biting my tongue, try to separate planning commission steps and council steps.
Yeah. We have to address the application in a certain time frame. We're there, we're bringing it back to the planning commission in a future meeting, it's looking like it will be early March. And then when they give their recommendation, then it comes to the council. And when it comes to you, you will have all that information in that packet, analysis, everything done. We didn't wanna spend much time doing a bunch of analysis on land use plans that we're gonna change or tweak a bunch, cause it's kind of a waste of time to do that.
And certainly nobody is expecting that this check-in indicates that the council is good with all the information, right? We know there's still more conversation to be had with the council.
Thank you.
So for the area, got a little extra circle on here, cause there's a little other area, so. couldn't figure out how to make the circle do weird shapes without really making it look bad, so. Safety circles. So this is the general master plan of the project. We've seen this a number of times. Some of the key things we've looked at here, go back to my notes so I don't get too far off track. So you can see there's 2,271 total units. That includes this area here that is going to go to Wasatch. And so you'll see that in some land use plans here in a little bit, how they're gonna do that swap. And then I broke down over into the right, because you can see the numbers on the top of how many of each unit they're proposing, each type of unit. Kind of the breakdown of how much of a percentage each types of those units would be in here. And you can see the size of lots. And so, moving on, and the average density you can see is about 3.5 units per acre is what they're looking at. There's quite a bit of open space included in this up on the hillside. And next slide shows just some of the project highlights. Wanted to get through it kind of quick. This is their general grading plan, and one of the key components of the 4 highlights we've got here are they've coordinated with a number of property owners. I think there's 13 property owners. And if this development were to develop hodgepodge, each individual property owner, you end up with streets that don't connect through, grades that don't work. We've seen it in the city and some other places. So that's a really big benefit. You end up with a comprehensive plan, creates some efficiencies with earthwork, utilities, roads. Creates a really cohesive development. The other thing is this would connect Juniper Crest, and there's only a few pods that would connect to this. So this is something that we'll need to discuss. If they have another pod way to the south, and it would only connect to Mountainview Corridor through another road. It's up to the council what you want to decide, but I know that's been a really big point. Council's asked the staff to make sure this would happen, so we've been watching that all along. They have the road plan, and we talked about it today, making it, they have backbone roads, they call them, and they're part of their phase 1, they'll be funded by a PID. So it'll allow them to get these infrastructure projects built early on in the project, phase 1. Another project highlight is the parks. So the park, the main park they're gonna do is Panorama Park, and it's going to have several amenities. It's gonna have some key things. Some of the things that were planned in Juniper Canyon may go over to Panorama or may go over to South Hills Park, to help us spread out the use, unconcentrate all the users in one place. But those 2 parks, I think they're both proposed to be funded with the PID, and would come in early on in the project and allow the residents that move into the area and existing residents in the area to be able to use those parks. You can see there's a lot of open space too. There's a lot of hillside in this area, so those areas are hard to turn into a park, but they're great for the trails and just providing some elbow room and breathing space up there for the residents to go up and use. So
How much of the open space is 30%?
there's a little piece. A lot of this area is through here, and then I think a little bit over here, but most everything else is part of outside of that hillside overlay 30% zone. And then the last item is the commercial. So in our older plans, these areas were shown more as a mixed use. So you'd get like the vertical mixed use, or you could get horizontal. But they've elected to do more of a pure commercial zone in these areas, and then buffer it with a little bit of higher density residential along the transportation corridors. And so that allows for more traditional commercial, which we've seen be pretty successful here. They also have this area shown in the middle, which I think it's shown in the Wasatch or the South Hills plan too, we'll see in a minute, as technology manufacturing. Wasatch shows it in their plan as just commercial, so we'll have to see where that ends up being. But technology manufacturing is what Bullfrog area is zoned as, so that would be more of a flex space type of use.
Is that still in this property? Is that what they're trading off with Wasatch or?
Yeah, these maps will be a little cleaned up. We talked to Chase about it earlier today, and they just executed those property swaps just in the last couple of weeks, so.
You don't love the technology on the Mountainview there?
No, the whole point is to create frontage along the corridor that would be retail-based, commercial that would be tax revenue generating. And so,
That's the whole point of it.
yeah, that was the original concept of creating that additional space and doing that,
So it's more associated with the South Hills project, so can we
We'll come back.
come back to that
Okay.
one when we get to their item, cause I think they'll be able to discuss that, more freely than we have. And so, yeah, there's 31.9 acres of commercial in this plan, they added some area here, and they're counting that as commercial, so.
But they're counting like that commercial in the DI project or the
Yeah,
one?
so we need to clean that
Okay.
area out, those are some things that need to be buttoned up before this goes to planning commission and then ultimately goes back to you guys.
Got it.
So, the planning commission discussion, they talked a little bit about vertical mixed use and incorporating that in some areas. We haven't seen that be super successful outside of, more of our urban centers, so it's hard to find a developer that wants to build it. Really, so the plan they're having with this more traditional commercial, it's more of a horizontal mixed use, seems to fit well in this area.
But on that one pod on Juniper, that's a housing component in there as well, right?
Here, yeah,
Even on the commercial, isn't it? Got some housing or?
no, I think
Okay.
it's.
No, it's just that part behind,
Okay.
up against where those condos are right now.
They were gonna do a
Housing.
mix and now they pushed it
Okay.
back.
Yeah, it's all just all on the backside, yeah.
So that was one discussion item that they had, and then the other one was the residential road cross sections. These golden colored roads have a cross section that puts a trail on one side and then a park strip and sidewalk on the other. Well, trail and park strip on one side and then the sidewalk up against curb and gutter on the other. And what I think the intent was to try to provide trail access from anywhere in the neighborhood out to the hillside trail system. So, there was some discussion about that cross section, how it should look, if we could modify it. I think with engineering looking at it and talking with them a little bit, there might be some concerns about signs and lights where they go. And then just street frontage and trees and the look and feel of the neighborhood.
If I recall right, we also had a conversation about like a border being put along the trail installation that was gonna go across driveways and stuff like that, so that it wouldn't
Yeah,
spread over time or
we
something like that.
kinda had a design where you pour the concrete and put the asphalt on top, so you just have a straight asphalt trail. Just so you wouldn't be going asphalt concrete across
Right,
the
right.
driveways, so
But
that's,
there was some way to help alleviate that asphalt from being
yeah.
distorted or squished or spread out over time.
Yeah,
Okay,
you just you pour the driveway and then leave a notch for the asphalt.
got it. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, those were the two main items that the planning commission brought up and discussed. So in the process of where we're at, we received application for this item. And so our next stop is public hearing at the planning commission, getting all the documents buttoned up so they can review. Planning commission has some purview on land use and the MDA. They won't be talking about PID and they won't be talking about financial analysis and things like that.
The developer does have an open house tomorrow night, just so you're aware of that.
We also have the general plan amendment and the zoning map amendments that are going along with the Panorama MDA.
Those are all exhibits
Yeah.
in the development agreement. So once the planning commission, I don't know if it'll take them 1, 2, multiple meetings, they'll get a recommendation out of there, just like any other project, and then they'll come to the council with their recommendation. And so with the Panorama MDA, there's a amendment to the Rosecrest MDA, because there are some acres that are included in the Panorama project that are existing in the Rosecrest MDA.
Sorry, just point of clarification for a couple comments made, so for public, they're paying attention to this, which you guys have gotten. I live on the opposite side of town and I'm getting calls and emails, right? So the public hearing for the planning commission is to give recommendation on what specifically to the council. General plan amendment, zoning amendment.
Yep, and the MDAs.
General land use.
Do those amendments all fall in line with our current land use and our new map, our latest?
We're working,
They're changes. Yeah,
Okay.
it is changes to that plan.
And the main thing I just want to reiterate, as I will tell people, go back and watch this part. When the planning commission looks at the MDA, as you said, they're not looking at the financial impacts and some of the legislative types of things that we are. If you wouldn't mind, give some examples. What are the general items that they're looking at in the MDA that they're recommending to us?
The MDA will include some modifications of the base zone. So there are certain concessions or betterments that the development team is trying to identify. So we want to memorialize those
Regarding the
amendments,
zoning.
yeah, right. So there's the base zone, and then how do we modify that base zone for this particular project? That will be specified in the MDA and its attachments. For example, as we've typically have seen in other projects, we will see design guidelines. And those guidelines will have some modifications to our standard zones. So those would be the kinds of things that the commission would be more focusing on, rather than really the structure, the contractual agreement that is between the council and the master developer, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so we talked about the Rose Crest NDA amendment. The PID, we've gotten a recommendation from the CD committee for their, LOI. And so now the governing document would be the next item. I think it's drafted, but just kind of waiting on final, things to go on with where the road alignment, are they working with the road alignments? That might shift some costs.
Are both entities of the Wasatch Hill or that development, both developments same PID or different PIDs?
They'll be, I believe, the same PID, all be one PID. I don't know if they'll do districts and then they'll activate them kind of like in a few days.
They'll have different governing boards, but they'll essentially be approved at the same time with the same general parameters,
Same governing document.
same governing document.
Right, because the PID isn't,
You can phase it.
right, cause the PID's gonna be whoever the landowner is, not who's under the MDA. So we have to, yeah, got it, that's what the different boards.
And the PID will pay for the backbone roads and the TARC and a few other items, but like the roads and things in the neighborhoods, they'll be paid for by the developer or the builder, whoever buys the parcel, however that works, they get a structure that, but.
I mean, the people who buy the houses at the end.
That is,
That's who the
that is
assessment-
the right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. So, yeah, that's the synopsis of where the projects are right now. You should be seeing things coming to you. Was there anything that stood out, or I think I had a couple notes here, or I didn't have any notes.
I have a whole ton of stuff for the, for our part of the MDA.
Yeah.
and-
Different part of, different discussion.
Yeah, different.
So,
It all comes to you.
Well,
Isn't that
I'm trying
fun?
to make the distinction both for the public who are paying attention and for us as we continue through, right? Cause there's a big difference.
And this is a different process than we did the last one, so.
And when I look at, when I look at the staff report, I'm like, so what is the next process, and what does off to the races mean? There's, the next part of it to
not
me
best
is
choice of words.
the heavy lifting that will take a bit of time.
Not off to the races, but just
But it's
Review.
around the bend, it's not a quarter horse race, this is a full
reviewing and
race.
sticking
It's a
to
few
timelines
laps.
based on our requirements for applications that get submitted.
Indy 500.
I think the idea is that all of this has been just preliminary discussion and idea sharing and conceptualization and stuff. And I think that it's now finally entering into the formal process of, and the steps that are required to get to a formal approval and a legislative decision. And I think that, there's a few steps that have to happen before it comes to us. And I think they're doing those first steps, that it's starting that formalization of the process instead of just the
Just wanna
conceptual
make sure I'm
discussion.
helping people understand the difference of those processes.
Not a done deal,
Yeah.
there's a process.
The decisions that are made at those different.
We wanted to get any big things out of the way before we went to planning commission, so that they weren't hitting the developer after they'd already spent much time and effort addressing things, so. Great.
2.4, same thing,
Same thing, similar
about
location.
half the time.
Okay. So this one's a little bit different actually, because this is an existing agreement that they're going to amend. So instead of a new agreement that's dealing with several different areas. This is an existing agreement with a handful of amendments. So this similar location, down on the south end of town, just a little bit further south. And so here's a summary of the amendment. We have some, those 5 items off on the left. I'll just go through each one of them, one by one, and kind of give a little description and information on each one. So the legal descriptions, you can see this is a map. The blue area is what's currently included in the Wasatch-South Hills MDA. And the little numbered areas are where there are key changes. And this was from our GIS information and what they submitted. And I'll go through each one of those areas here in a little bit and kind of explain what's being added or taken away and what the increase or decrease is. So the existing land use is shown up here. And I'll have a little side-by-sides here in a second to show the existing and the proposed land use for each area, each change, make the key change areas. If you notice, if you keep an eye on the pods down here, they change quite a bit from the approved from 2022 to the proposed, which is what their application is to change these. So as we go through each one, these are the areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll go through 6 slides and show each area and what the difference is. So here's area 1. This is pod 5. You can see that it's got quite a different shape. This was all part of their negotiations and working with DAI, getting more efficient use of the land in the area. And you can see this is where that TM zone is. They're showing it in the red, which is their commercial use. So that's something that'll have to be cleaned up. So this area is a decrease in total acres, an increase in, this area is all shown as medium density. This orange is high in this one, so it's a little bit higher density, higher intensity use. But they did add commercial areas, so that's the summary of area 1, that was a key difference. Area 2 is pod 6. This is a piece where they've also worked with DAI and it's part of the swap, so this area increases, well, it takes the medium density out. And
they changed pod 21, 23, all that right there.
From the high density to
that's
the.
what I- so yeah, this, maybe I jumped ahead of myself here. I'm getting confused. Should have numbered these a little better in my notes, but yeah, so this one increases in medium density and then the open space, but you can see this note, this is kind of a slope open space. So those are areas where we've discussed, maybe the city doesn't want those, we don't want maintenance responsibilities in those areas. So yeah, this isn't included in any agreement currently. This is an area that wasn't in the master development agreement, it's being added into this one.
Which area was that, like 20?
This little triangle
That
piece that you can't see. Yeah, so the next area this is the Staker parcel on the south end. This is an addition of approximately 120 acres, adding into their MDA. This one is all low density, provides a road connection into the Malibu parcel, and has pretty significant amount of open space associated with it. It would add to the city, so.
Again, what's the
How much
slope?
is usable?
This one is pretty slippery there, I believe. It might actually be mined, most of it already. A lot of this area is part of that Staker mine. But I think this area right here is an area they're currently working and.
Been flattened mostly, graded.
And then that green stuff is the non-graded steep slope.
Or it might be graded and sloped.
What's the hash marks indicate, anything?
That's just the area that's being added. It wasn't current, because it wasn't in the MDA before, now it is, so.
And then your red dot up there,
That's a water tank, the tanks that we've been talking about for a while.
the one for DII
That's
put in?
zone 3 tank,
Okay.
so it's the.
The higher one.
Then this little area is just a little piece that was a UDOT parcel that wasn't included in, they've acquired the UDOT parcel and incorporated it into pod 17, so. Not a huge change there, but adds a little bit of property for housing. This
We do
area.
have some other changes on those densities there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other changes in the pods, and we'll get to that in a minute. It was really hard to analyze because the shapes changed, and so I broke down a table here, a couple slides away, but I can show that. This was the last area, and this was not shown in the approved last land use master plan, but they've shown pod one as open space in this one, so that was one area that was pretty significantly different. And this is the breakdown I was talking about. So the big summary is, there's an increase from 2,770 units to 3,040, but there's also a pretty significant increase in acreage. So if you look, I've broken the tables down into the lower area that's already developed over here. And these acres are right off their plats that were recorded and the units that were approved for the planning commission and their average densities. And then this area is everything that's above or uphill of Mountainview corridor that's undeveloped. So if you look lump 4, lump 5, the comparisons, you have an increase in acreage and you also have a pretty good increase in commercial. Sorry, Sherry.
No, you're good.
The units, you have an increase, but your density actually decreases because they added the acres. They're proposing to add the acres. Or it's really the Staker piece adds a lot of acreage and not a lot of density. So that, it was really hard to go through and compare. I know the developer dropped off the table and it had numbers all over it and colors, and trying to go through and figure out what this pod was and what it became was really difficult and really hard to follow. And so I just broke it down into low, just the land uses, and compared it, and that seemed to be the easiest way.
So what's the net change or net difference, 6235 in acres,
That's acres.
187 units, and then we've decreased in the average density overall slightly,
For the uphill piece only.
Okay.
I wanted to keep that.
outside of the MDA, of the current approved.
From what's lump 4 is what's approved, and lump 5 is what's being proposed.
One of the things that we'll do, Teddy, is that we're going to do an overall analysis to make sure that we're still meeting that original benchmark that was established in the current MDA.
Oh, the Rose Chris one.
This is South Hills.
South Hills one,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so we'll have that information for you.
A key thing to note here is this number is based off of this unit distribution estimate. And so they still have a number shown over here that is their max number of units based on their 4.5 units per acre that's allotted in the MDA. And so we haven't quite come to terms on how to exactly handle locking in that number, but still allowing the high number. So there's some discussion still to be had there. I know it'll come, probably not tonight, it's tonight, but.
Yeah.
So, however we want to handle that, we're open to any suggestions. We know it's an issue that's gonna need to be addressed, we just don't know exactly how the council wants to address it at this point. The next item is a really easy one, they're gonna update who we contact.
If I may,
No.
what we're telepathically telling each other, I'm gonna try to just summarize it this way, to what we had said last time we discussed this, in my notes in November. This is where we've said we're good with the concept, right? And this is updating us, okay, this is the concept that's gone to planning commission, here's some of the technical things, but some of these numbers have to be worked out in the MDA when it comes to us, right? So those are the things that we're going to decide that isn't really on the table for the planning commission necessarily. Is that fair enough, vague enough, Steve?
Yeah. It's just, I just look at I mean, in just the 4 years I've been on council, I think we've revised this 4 times. This will be probably the 3rd or 4th revision.
2020, 2022, and then this one.
Yeah. And each one of those, we've changed pod sizes, pod shapes, densities, from high to medium to low. We've added acreage, we've subtracted acreage, we've added green space, we've changed. I mean, it's substantial, I don't know, let me not overstate this. there are substantial changes from where we were in 2020 versus where we are now in 2024. Substantial changes. And the part that, and I brought this up when we had our joint meeting months and months and months ago about this, is that the assertion of the 4.5 units an acre that just continues to exist, it doesn't coincide with the realities of what's developable and with what their plan is. And the disconnect between, we have this great plan, we want you to adopt, it's 1,471 units. That's appealing, right? We're locking in numbers, we're locking in pods, we're really getting down to a nitty-gritty. The idea that there's still hundreds or 1,000 or more units that are being preserved in this agreement that are somehow going to be, that, well, no, we need to save these for something, that's concerning to me, it continues to act as a point of leverage that we're gonna be trapped or forced into some other kind of decision or decision because of something that was decided, 15 years before we got into office. I just don't like the idea that those units are continuing to be preserved if we're going to come to an agreement on this, if that makes sense. I don't like us to have an agreement with this huge contingency.
So this is the stage I'm trying to set.
Right.
That these are the discussions that we've said we need to have, we've yet to have. I have a whole list of what are our must-haves in an MDA, et cetera.
Right.
That are not addressed in any of this, and that's okay, because I'm trying to separate, this is planning commission, they really don't have anything to do with that. That's us, which is the next step. And if we're going to revise existing agreements, this is going to be more difficult and cumbersome, take more time than if it's a new agreement. As I stated in November.
That's why I like the Panorama new agreement, right? That does all that. And it creates a new agreement from scratch, we start over, it's great, it's done. It's just.
There are lots of elements that we will want to change to continue to.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't wanna get us too off
Signal
track,
that.
I'm just, there's still a lot of lifting to be done on some of these things, so.
Right, no, that's good feedback, helpful. Yeah, the next item, simple, easy, they're updating their contact information.
We're trying really hard not to.
Should we contact in case of anything? And then the last change is the technical guidelines, and there's a lot of information in here, well, we'll have to unpack it when we get there. Planning Commission, I'm sure will look at these in great detail and come back with some recommendations. Some of the concerns that staff has had in working through looking at some of these, the 18-foot setbacks, a lot shorter than what we're requiring currently. And then this is the medium density small lot, so it allows the developer, the way it's written, to apply it in any medium or high density area. And if you look at the land use plan, one of the areas is right along Soleil Hills Drive, which is the main road. And so if you have a shortened driveway and you have trails and sidewalks out along there and narrow lots, it's gonna be really hard to back cars out. We don't want cars backing out.
Park.
It's gonna be
Yeah, I thought we were done with this short driveway conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Planning Commission will come back with some recommendations on this
Yeah,
item.
that's just a problem I thought we had already solved, right?
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that and I know the developer was trying to address some things that the original agreement, how it was written and how things had been completed as they went through plots 2 and 4 down by the RSL complex. They got away and they had some uses that weren't really, they were in between what was defined in the technical guidelines. So they're trying to clean that up, that's what we asked them to do. And that was the intent here, but there were some other things that got put in that we might have some issues with. The other one is the open space. This one, we asked the developers, they were starting, if you look at their land use plan, they had open space, but they also identify park spaces, they're almost like pocket parks in the pods. We said, if we're gonna put these into pods, we wanna really define what amenities are going in and what is gonna be used. So I think this is an attempt at things that get used in there. So planning commission will look at that, have some good recommendations, and I'm sure we'll have more discussion on this, maybe tighten it up or tidy it up, but this was an attempt at that.
Will there be a delineation, in the land use over what is what is the term, improved open space versus,
I think they try to
passive
do it
open
here.
space?
I've read so many agreements in the last few days, I can't remember which one's which, but yeah, there should be, if we don't have it already, what is native open space, what is
What's gonna be the improved versus the passive, okay.
manicured open space, and then
And if I may, the word restored, like if something was meant to be native, but wasn't, the purpose would be to restore it to native.
they have a lot of areas that are already mined, so they'll have to put that back to something, whatever we thought it was before.
And that's probably under the mining agreement too that Staker had, right?
They have a bond with
Yeah.
Dogum and all those.
Degrading agreement,
Even a vegetation agreement too. Yeah.
it's a grading agreement, not
They-
a mining agreement.
And the
Oh,
state did
that's
issue
not-
them a mining permit, that's,
Just,
Remember that
I
discussion?
have a question for you. So, just if Jordan Valley moves forward with their water budget and we're limited at 1.35, how much water, are we gonna have to buy additional water from them to supply this? And is that gonna be a limiting factor on some of the density in these
So with
areas?
the new water efficiency standards, I don't believe that we'll be above that 1.35. But those are calculations we're currently doing now with Jordan Valley discussing that. We're identifying our total developable area and understanding how much water we're currently using and trying to project that. So, I mean, with the water efficiency standard, I don't think so, but we need to evaluate that.
Okay, I just wanna see that as part of what comes back.
review of the planning commission discussion, we had, so that table that I told you that had a lot of numbers and colors, there were some discussions about the calculations and how, so I knew it was confusing when they looked at it, so that's why I simplified the table up. We'll probably come back with a lot more detail, and have some hybrid between table I made and one the developer made. The design, housing elevations, these are some of the examples that were provided in their presentation to the planning commission. These are some of the houses that may be on the medium density small lots we talked about. And so, and then you can see the townhome designs at the bottom. So there was some discussion about look, feel, location, things like that. And so I'm sure they'll have some recommendations. And then the open space, oops, I thought I had another slide there, but they talked a little bit about open space and how usable some of the areas were. A lot of it has to do with that, we call it the Wasatch-South Hills Park, that was in the DAI plan. They're kind of sharing the property and donating fees for that between the two developers. So there was a regional park in the original plan, and then they took that out with this proposed plan. With the slopes and the hills, it gets a little tricky to try to build that in and have a big area and not impact the way the roads function, so we're kind of tucked in the corner, so it gets tough, but that's the summary of the planning commission discussion, and then this is where we're at in the process. This one's a little bit simpler, like I said, they just have their amendment to go through, they have their application in, so they'll be going to planning commission for public hearing, I think in March is what we're targeting. And then this public infrastructure district will also be the same time with DAIs, it's the same application for that, so. Any questions or last things to
Not
put in
today.
before we take it to
Yeah.
planning
Not
commission?
today.
I think that's the deal, it's just thank you for the update and it needs to go through the process and then when it comes here, then it's our opportunity to go through the process to make sure that it has components in it that we feel like it's legislatively.
And I think it's important to understand, there's so many things that have been done and included in these agreements and some of the things you're discussing,
Yeah.
that there's so many positive elements that are being brought to the table, right? And I don't wanna, as we're starting to focus in on areas of concern or nitpick or that's not to diminish the overall positive work that's been done and the direction that this thing is going. So I don't,
Totally agree.
I think the public needs to hear that too, that this has been years of back and forth and discussion and a developer really trying to embrace so many of the recommendations we've been making and incorporate that into what they're trying to get to, so.
Well, and I agree, and back to the original point, as far as getting that many landowners together and agreeing and trying
Yeah,
to
it's
come
incredible.
together, that's big accomplishment because it would be a lot of hodgepodge, because it's not like we can say, sorry, nobody can develop up there, right? And whether you wanna keep looking at the mountainside or not, I guess if you wanna keep looking at it, you have to purchase the land from all these people and leave it like it is, if that's the money you have. Otherwise, there are rights associated with property. And so this has just been a great collaborative effort to bring it together and try and make something that would be cohesive and work. So it's what it is, but then it comes to us to make, recommendations for legislatively. It will be back here.
Just one thing for public consumption, what I've told people that have asked me the last few days when they've seen the post about their open house tomorrow, that's their open house, it's not the city. That's them telling the public what they would like to do. The city's not said, yep, we're 100% gonna do all these things, et cetera. That's separate. And for public consumption, this is not a brand new development of that, 600 something acres that really, this is, the way I described it to a couple of people this last few days is I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but this is there are two really big areas with current property owners, developers that have existing agreements that in my opinion are for the most part very bad for the city. That now there's a third entity that's trying to combine them all together, which gives us an opportunity to work with them to make mutually beneficial changes to those existing agreements and try to make things better going forward. So this isn't something brand new that we're adding all of this in. This is something existing that we're trying to work together to improve.
That's enhancements to what exists, yeah.
Okay.
It's good stuff.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now we'll bounce back to 2.2, discussion pertaining to revisions to Heron Title 5. Thanks, guys.
Good evening to you guys.
I was gonna say, man, I've never seen so many people at a work meeting in a long time. Wow. Very popular.
That's my new clone.
Shower the solar panels.
Eau de Soleil.
All right, thanks Mayor and Council for giving me the task to look at Title V again. And so this is gonna be the Valentine's edition.
Oh no. Nice. We love it.
Oh no.
And just before we start, my kids are very they love animals, and this was my oldest daughter wrote this a couple years ago. Silly Cat by Rachel. Oh Fluffy, who is in the winter is so fluffy. Your eyes are as blue as deep pools of silliness, and your fur is so long it sheds and creates a mess. You're weird, Fluffy. I love you.
That is awesome.
So there's Fluffy and my dog, Mark, by the way. It was my I should say it's my daughter's dog,
Jim,
who picked the name, and after a lot of debate, she would not move off the name Mark. So we have Mark and Fluffy. So we're talking about the number of animals, restraining dogs, females in heat penalties, and breedings in our kennels, fancier permits. So the number of animals. You probably see these articles more frequently than we should, where there's way too many animals in a home. Los Angeles Times even picked up an article.
Who let the dogs out?
We let him have the sound.
Wow,
So-
I should not be.
Alright.
Trying to figure out.
Put rules on this.
Cody's taking notes.
Now we end up with administrative policies that governs how we can do presentations.
I like it, Todd, I like it. Keep going.
You were the best.
Trying to write an ordinance on how many animals is very difficult. So typically what we like to do is see what other municipalities are doing. Of the Salt Lake, the 17 communities here in Salt Lake Valley, 17 of them restrict how many animals, and on average, it's about 4. It's typically 3 of one kind, so 3 dogs or 3 cats, up to 4, so you can have 2 and 2. two Salt Lake communities do not restrict the number of animals, Magna and Kearns, and I think they are the exact same language, and I'm pretty sure one copied from the other.
Wait, you have four in here, Kearns, Magna, Mill Creek, and Salt Lake City.
So that was, yes, so, Kearns and Magna are explicitly in the code, and I reached out to the other two, cause I couldn't find it in their ordinance, and they emailed back saying, yeah, it's not unlimited, so,
What is it?
Mill Creek was, I can't remember the number of animals. The NAIA, the National, National Animal Interest Alliance, recommends no limit. And the NACA and the AVMA, so that's the National Animal Control Association and the American Veterinary Medical Association, they don't have any specific recommendations, but they try to focus more on whether or not the animals are being harmed, humane treatment, that sort of thing. So, discussion. You've asked us to look at this title. This has been a point of discussion with council previously. I just need this guidance on what the council wants. And it can pick anything from a few animals up to unlimited animals. We just need to know.
So we're doing this one at a time, right?
Yep.
So this is 4.
So to ask this question, from a legal standpoint, could we make a delineation between agriculture property versus residential property?
Yeah, and that was actually something that Sherry pointed out, is that we need to make sure that there is a clear delineation between domesticated animals and farm animals. And in my original draft, I attempted to make that distinction, and then after some comments back from Sherry, I tried to clean it up a little bit more to make that distinction.
Going beyond domesticated animal versus farm animal, I would say that there should be some consideration over the kind of property is, right? I mean,
Sure.
And maybe, something tied to the acreage, right? I mean, it's easy with farm animals, let's say you have this many acres, you can have this many animals, that kind of thing, but at least that's where my thoughts have been going, that, you know, a 1/4 acre residential lot would be different than a 5 acre agriculture lot, right?
Sure.
Very different
Sure.
type of limitations there.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, you can have our existing ordinances, I really didn't wanna say anything about this till the end, about any of this stuff. But if, correct me if I'm wrong, but 1/2 acre, you can have 2 large animals, so 2 horses, 2 cows, 2 buffalo, whatever, so what's domesticated, what's farm?
Yeah.
Well, it's in the definition now, domesticated animal versus agricultural animals, it's actually in the definitions now, which I appreciate. Domestic is listed basically as dogs, cats, those kinds of things, and then agricultural animals are
So
listed differently. There needed to be a definite
Yeah, so
definition between the two
my
of
point
them.
is, okay, so there's a definition, but then to tie that to acreage, well, 1/2 acre gets you large farm animals.
So you could have 3 horses, 4 horses, 10 horses, and 3 dogs.
But what I'm saying is legislative, we can address that in terms of whether that is a residential 1/2 acre or an agricultural 1/2
That's where
acre.
I'm going.
Right.
Okay.
I guess my question is always the why, right? And I always, my little libertarian in me is like, why do I care what people do on their private property unless it's causing some sort of safety issue for other people? Now, there is in this ordinance, you can't have your dogs barking an excessive amount of time, those kinds of things. So we already are gonna limit impact it might have on neighboring properties, right? So if my guess is if you had 70 cats in someone's home, there's gonna probably be some humane violations in there. They're probably not in humane settings. There's probably a lot of cat feces around and things like that that are causing a safety issue for the property owners because
A health issue.
a health issue, right? And so I guess to this point recommends no limits. I think they don't recommend no humane environment. They just say that it's not based on and that's been my argument every time, I don't care about the number.
Not just the number.
I want to know that the animals are in a humane environment. It's like I've had many conversations with different dog owners who raise puppies. They have, a couple of different bitches that have litters, maybe at the same time. I don't care, as long as you can demonstrate to me that they're being properly cared for, they're in a humane setting, and you're not hitting these other violations of your dogs are barking all night, or, that are impacting your neighbors, excessive impact to them. So I guess I'm just always, why would we limit it to a certain arbitrary number when, in my mind, it should just simply be, your animals have to be treated humanely in our city.
Well, I think, your comment brings up another issue on another topic about profiting or business or running that out of your home. And I think having this ordinance or a limitation on the amount of animals you can have on domesticated, you're gonna avoid that and be able to enforce that.
Yeah, but there's one, so let me just give you an example, right? If I have a dog and it gets pregnant and has puppies, I could go from having
there's time
two
limits.
dogs to 12 dogs in
Yeah.
one day. If there's a number limit, just because they had Mother Nature happens and they had puppies, I'd be in violation of a number.
No, you wouldn't.
Typically, there's an exception for breeding, like
litters.
the
There is.
first
Well, right,
litter.
but what I'm saying is that has to be a part of our consideration, right? Now, if that is somebody who just had some puppies and is selling them off, is that a standing commercial business? I don't know, now we're getting way into the weeds of how we define that stuff. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a conversation about it, but trying to say, okay, you can only have this many dogs and you can only have this many puppies and you can only do it this many times a year and you can only, that starts to get really complicated
So,
for us. to try
For
and
this,
regulate.
usually you're gonna, if you were to put something in on animals, you're gonna do it after a certain age. So your situation, you wouldn't count till they were over 6 months, right? The issue, well, it depends on your ordinance, right? You do I can't remember what we put on this, but usually you have some time frame. As we start to talk about breeding or casual breeding, you start to get into some home occupations, so it's probably the number of animals is going to be the lesser part of your problem that you're dealing with in that, so, I don't know that if you put 4 in it may impact that, it may not. If you say unlimited, it's still not going to allow that because you have so many other land uses and impacts on neighbors, the things that you have to consider when you're operating businesses out of in a residential zone,
So when I look at this, I look at it, it's like, how do we avoid news articles like this, right? How do you avoid having 70 cats in a house? And it gets to the nuisance part. So there should be a magic number in there. I don't know what it is. Steve, you could have 3, 4 dogs, 5 dogs on your property, you'd be okay.
I already have one too many.
Yeah, and you have one, or you got 2.
I have 2,
Okay.
yeah.
But on mine,
Big, so they equate.
No, well, we have a new little one and she needs to go live on a farm.
she needs some acreage.
Yes, she does.
But in my property, like 1 dog would be plenty enough, and my neighbor has two dogs or 3 dogs, and they're small little Yorkies, they're great, right? I couldn't personally handle more than 2 dogs on my property, just cause I wouldn't think that I wouldn't feel like I was humane to them. So,
I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I guess the thing about it is first of all, I don't have any idea how you're gonna enforce that. That is a nightmare waiting to happen to ask our code enforcement to go, okay, now which zone are you in and how many dogs and
no,
what
yeah,
size are your dogs?
I don't wanna do, I think it needs to be overbroad, like, needs to be X, 4, 5, whatever that is, right? But then all the delineators, ag or res. If it's on an ag land, I'd even count my dogs, my sheep herding, like my blue heelers and all that would be agriculture dogs. Because they're working dogs, right? I wouldn't count them as a domesticated animal, but maybe they are.
But again, I just think we just get so far into the weeds on that. And are you gonna tell the guys who live in this apartment unit or those townhouses, you have 2 big dogs, those are too big for your unit, you know what I mean?
I think that'd be too
It's
much.
just the problem
They
is,
end up taking them to.
yeah, because I just
Or the
think,
shelter.
we have to look at it from a practical enforcement. too, it's like, are animal enforcement gonna have to pack around a map saying, are you zoned A or are you zoned R? You know what I mean, because in my area, a lot of the people are on, 10,000 square foot lots, or some of them are a little bit smaller, cause they threw in a park, maybe they're on 8,000 square foot, but they're still A zone,
A's, yeah.
and,
Well, there's-
I don't know, do you
But
know what I'm saying?
Okay, I would say that though, I think that, to your point about the news articles, right? You're saying removed from a home, not removed from a property, right?
Yep.
And I think that's probably where the humane health nuisance stuff starts to come in is, how many domesticated animals do you have living in your home, right? And I don't know what the right answer, but unfortunately, as a council, we're being asked to come up with some magic number here, and that's where it's challenging. And I don't
Are
know
we
whether
being
that's
asked to?
3 or 5 or 8 or 17, like, I don't know what the magic number is.
But are we being asked to come up with a number, or are we arbitrarily putting that pressure on ourselves? That's my question. Are we looking at other cities around us and saying they all have a number, so we should have a number? I don't understand. Are we being asked to come up with a number, or are we assuming that we need a number? And 70 cats, I can promise you that if you got 70 cats in your house, you're probably in violation of a lot of health codes, right? And so I just, and there are stories like that come up in.
149 dogs.
Yeah, but there's stories like that happen all the time, right? And in cities that say you can only have 3 cats and they have 70, right? So it doesn't mean that you're not gonna have bad actors, you have bad actors, that's just, or somebody that just becomes obsessed because they want a billion cats, right?
So maybe let's start there, Todd, Chief, where, as I'm reading the staff report, it says that this effort began trying to just clean up our ordinance. So what is it currently regarding the number, and what are we being asked, what problem are we being asked to solve?
Yeah, currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think 3, yep.
Well, 3 of any one kind.
So 3 is what it is.
4 total.
Or
Is that
both,
right?
three of
Yeah,
any
4,
one
right?
kind.
As a special treat, I brought the director of animal services, DA.
So it's like, I can have 2 dogs or a hamster.
Notice how they separated themselves.
Or 3 dogs.
You can have 3 dogs and a cat,
I think
3
that's
cats
how
and a
it's
dog,
written.
2
Yeah.
parrots and 2
What about,
cats.
what about scorpions?
There's a chart.
3 of one
You can-
kind, 4 total.
Well, and that's what we're talking about now.
It's interesting though, you can
is
have 1,000
No, you asked what it
hamsters
is
and
now.
there's
That's-
no regulation on that.
Because of the size or the, like, that's what.
I think it's mostly because you tend to regulate dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Right, I think ours
So-
actually currently involves ferrets as well, which
Yeah.
is a.
So
And
what's
is
the-
it a fee? Is it for a fee or registration? Because we don't know who has dogs or anything unless they come in and tell us.
Typically,
Right,
well,
that's
so
licensed.
your dogs, you're supposed to register them for the rabies, the cats is a different world.
I know what you're supposed to do with cats.
So in my experience, typically, the only time you're really enforcing this is when it's a nuisance for the neighbors,
Yeah.
right? The neighbors will call up and say, hey, they've got too many dogs in their backyard, and you go out there and there's 6 dogs, you're only supposed to have 4, you talk to them, and you start working through that process. I've never, in 25 years, had an animal control officer just drive around going, how many dogs do they have?
Yeah,
Now, it probably comes in when they come to register, if you're like, you've already got 6 dogs, you can't have 2 more.
Yeah, but
But that's that,
okay, but here's the thing, cause one of the situations that was explained to me that, was an issue when this first came up was somebody called in a complaint, they weren't even a neighbor. Like somebody from, 6 streets away is calling to complain about
Or
it.
even another state.
Well, that's not a valid nuisance complaint, that's a, hey, I don't like what they're doing complaint.
But once it's
And
been
that's
founded.
a neighbor pissing on another neighbor's
So
yard, I mean,
here's
that's
the thing,
crap, I don't
whether
know.
it's this ordinance or any other ordinance or law that we've talked about, I know I've said this before, but any ordinance or law, no matter what it is not, in my opinion, I'm not, you guys are the law enforcement experts, any of those laws are, most of the time, as far as I know, none of them are meant to have someone go and enforce them to the letter, every single person, make sure that everyone is complying with this. Any ordinance law is a social construct to help mediate issues that arise amongst ourselves, right? It's a social, it's a way to solve social problems. I don't like what they're doing. Well, what does the rule say, right? And then you have a legislative process, a legal process to help balance those property rights. Is what they're doing affecting that other person's property rights? A lot of it's subjective, and that's why we have a legal process. All we're doing is trying to give a starting point, right, for that process.
The framework, yeah.
So there is no one size fits all for any of these things, which is why I come back to, and I think where Nathan was trying to go with that is that there isn't a single best answer for anything. It's what's the most reasonable answer for that starting point for when there are issues, which is kind of my thing is, all right, so we're trying to clean this up. This is what it is now. To me, this is bordering on the chicken stuff that I've referenced before.
Getting there right now.
Chicken or the egg?
Like,
No chickens in
like
this
you have,
sentence either.
oh my gosh, you have, like, we need a starting point. We already have a starting point. This is where we're at. The only reason we're talking about this is they're trying to clean up the language. So is there, for me, is there a reason to change the number from what it is now?
Well, I think I brought up that reason when this was initially presented to us many years ago. It's been probably 3 years in the making to get to this point. And when it came before us, and I said, then why is there a limit of 3 dogs? And the answer was, it's easiest, if we go out and there's a problem, it's easiest for us to handle 3 dogs.
So
And it's like, okay, but
enforcement.
is that,
Right,
is
there's a
that a
problem.
reason to limit a person's property rights to only allowing them to have 3 dogs just because it's easier for you to do that?
I don't think that's the only reason. Like I
Well,
said,
that was the only reason that was presented.
right? So that gives a starting point, and we asked them, what do most other communities do? And why? And those that I've talked to, is kind of the same thing. Well, what kind of along Teddy's line of reasoning, which I agree with, is there's kind of a reasonable level here, right? So I have a large yard, half acre, I have a couple big dogs. I could probably have 6 dogs on there, and I'm a responsible dog owner. In my opinion, 90% of dog owners aren't responsible enough to have more than 2. They just aren't gonna take care of them well enough. They aren't gonna take care of the yard and the poop and everything well enough. They definitely don't get them vaccinated like they should, all those sorts of
Exercise them
things.
as much.
So there is a frontier that you reach with a number that I think is reasonable, no matter how big the dog is, for a residential property.
And if you want any more case
As a
studies,
s-
just look at the shelter or the
Yeah.
dog pounds, I mean,
As a
that's,
starting point. And so, I mean, I could, and I can say I'm responsible and I have 6 dogs. I'm not breeding, but I have 6 and they're rescues. And I take care of them and they're great, but my neighbors hate me and they disagree because there's more noise and there's more smell and it's a constant point of contention that they're always getting calls for. What's a reasonable right, starting point for that conflict to be resolved?
And one of the alternatives that we haven't talked about, at least in the meetings I've been in, is there a magic number, and then is there an application for a variance? Is 4 the magic number where we're at now, but I have a bigger piece of property, I have a bigger yard, I have something else going on, and could I come in and petition Animal Services to allow for 2 additional dogs because of X, and we go out and say, yeah, you have a permit, we've seen your property, we know that you are taking care of the animals, and we'll allow that to occur. And it gives us some ability to control that, and it's revocable, so if we come back.
Do worry
say-
about the staff
It
commitment
certainly is
for
a
something
bigger
we added
commitment,
on
but it's
variance.
another alternative to that.
I'm starting to like Title V as much as I like Black Ridge right now.
So,
we figured that out.
Honestly, I think we're,
Well,
I think we're opening this up way too,
That's
we're
where I'm
getting
going.
way too far into the weeds.
So that's what I said, let me try to, because we've got to try to.
I wanna hear from enforcement, like what's your suggestion?
It sounds like,
Because that's what this is
I
a
would
starting, when a
pick a
confrontation
number.
happens, what's the starting point they have to work with?
Certainly an unlimited, unrestricted poses a significant problem for us, because then we
On
have
multiple
to
fronts.
get to articulating that there is a problem, and yeah.
And that's completely
6 or
subjective.
7 dogs or whatever, but it could require us going out multiple times, having multiple interactions with multiple neighbors, collecting tons of information
Over a
to
long
be
period
able,
of time.
because simply when we show up, those 7 dogs are all gonna start barking every single time an officer goes there.
And it's, and
So
like I said,
it's
if it's
hard
my
for
6 or
me-
7 dogs,
Yeah.
I'm fine, I do a great job.
And so the ones we do have that are even 2 or 3 or 4 dogs that are causing a nuisance, it's difficult for us, it's frustrating for the complainant or complainants, because we're asking them to send us documentation, because if we go out, or anyone goes out.
How more slides do you have?
BA, how delineated from ag and res, what would that look like on you guys? Is it cumbersome?
Obviously, it becomes more difficult because just like with our code enforcement people, when we talked about some of the other things, is being able to discern what the lot size is. My lot's 0.45 acres, the person behind me is on 0.64. Pretty easy to tell when you look that, hey, his lot's way bigger than his, but it's gonna start to get messy depending on where it is now. If it's zoned a certain thing and that street's colored a certain way on your map, you know, hey, everything in this neighborhood is in this agricultural zone, but where I'm at in the Rose Creek Ranches, there's just in the span of the circle in my neighborhood, there's horses on one side of the city open space, but those of us on the other side don't have a big enough lot for horses, so it does create a problem. It's not undoable, but it just makes it more complex.
Let me just put this, we can talk, I think we can talk in circles. Any desire then to change, I think there's 3 with 1, so 4, we're at 4 currently in that.
Yeah.
Let me just take a straw poll, any desire to change it?
No. Okay, alright, that's the direction I need. I have a couple more slides, but I'm assuming they're gonna cause quite a bit of debate, each one of them. So I don't
Do you
know,
wanna pause?
yeah,
I'll make a motion to really pause or
We will be fast in there because we are, one item is dropped off.
Yeah.
The one rezone, Michael, we've got a call, the rezone's not coming tonight, so we have to push it. So that should leave us only 2 quick items, so we should be fast.
We've got some presentations.
We have a couple, but we'll try to be quick, so. My wife's flight is still not left Minnesota, so
Yeah, plenty of time.
I can charge you getting going by 9 o'clock. So I look for a motion to temporarily recess then.
I'll make a motion.
We went until 10 o'clock.
Motion second. All in favor?
Tony, take me to that basket.
Just say Valentine's.